In this Java tutorial, we're looking at what Java actually does when you pass variables to methods. So I have an int array, and a string here. And I'm going to pass all of them to the method change variables, which will attempt to change their values. But when we print these variables out, then we can see that only the array gets changed. The number of orcs remains the exact same, and the username remains the same as before the method got executed. So why is this? What kind of craziness is Java doing here? In Java, there are two broad types of variables. We have primitive variables and object reference variables. There are 8 types of primitive variables: bytes, shorts, ints, longs, chars, booleans, floats, and doubles. And any variable that is not one of these 8 types is an object reference variable. For object reference variables, when Java sets aside a piece of memory to hold the variable, that piece of memory actually just holds a memory address inside of it. For example, if you made a scanner named scnr, then when Java goes into memory, it names a piece of memory scnr, and then it just puts a little memory address in here. We'll say that's C6, and then Java goes to memory address C6, and that's where it actually puts the scanner. So this is why these are called object reference variables, because the variable is just a reference to the memory address where the actual object is held. Whereas if you make an integer, then Java will come into memory and actually store the value of that integer inside of that slot of memory that's been set aside. And this is because integers are primitive variables. So that's the first piece of info that we need to understand what's going on. The second thing we need to understand is what's actually happening when Java passes a variable to a method. When Java passes a variable to a method, it doesn't really pass it, it just copies the value of that variable and it makes a new variable at the top of the method. So when we pass an object reference variable to a method, a new variable gets made and it gets the exact same value as the object reference variable that got passed in. So in the case of our imaginary scanner here, the new scanner variable in the method would just hold the same memory address as the scanner variable that got passed into the method. So if we make any changes to that spot in memory, then those changes are going to affect both of the variables because they both point to the same thing, which is the reason why we were able to change our array, because arrays are also object reference variables. So our array variable inside of our method is pointing to the exact same array as the array variable inside of our main method. So that's why we could successfully change the value of our array. When Java passes a primitive variable like an integer to a method, then it also just makes a new variable and copies the value of the variable that got passed in into that new variable. But then if you change the value of the variable inside of the method, this change doesn't affect the variable outside of the method because these are two different variables. And unlike with our object reference variable, they're not both pointing to the same spot in memory because primitive variables aren't holding memory addresses at all. They just hold the value of the variable inside of the piece of memory that's been set aside for the variable. So almost all object reference variables, like arrays and custom objects, can be changed inside of methods, and that change will also affect the variable that got passed into the method. One interesting exception is strings. When Java makes a string, it does the exact same thing as it does for all other object reference variables. It just holds a location in memory inside of the variable, and then it'll store the actual string at that location in memory. But in Java, when you try changing the value of a string, Java makes a brand new string, which is something really specific that only happens with strings. So inside of our method, when we try changing the value of a string, Java actually just makes a new string and then makes our string variable inside of the method point to that new string. But it doesn't update this memory address for the variable that got passed into the method. So now our two string variables, the one that got passed in and the one that we have inside of the method, are both pointing to different strings. So that's why when we tried changing the value of our string inside of our method, the change wasn't successful because the original memory location that the string that got passed into the method was pointing to didn't get changed at all. You might have heard someone say before that Java has immutable strings, and this is all that means, that when you change the value of a string, Java actually just makes a new string. In this area of memory where Java's storing all the objects over here is called the heap. All objects in Java live on the heap. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll put some links to some of my longer Java videos in the description, as well as some links to some awesome Java books. Thanks for watching.